University of California. Thank you for tuning in today for the July 2020 edition of the UC Alumni Career Network. My name is Dianna Henderson, and I serve as the Chief of Staff to the VP of System-Wide Human Resources and Executive Director of System-Wide Human Resource Policy at the University of California Office of the President. I am honored to be moderating today's event focused on women and work. This program is part of a UC-wide effort to unite and support alumni across our 10 campuses. We aim to equip you with the information, insights, and connections necessary to launch, grow, or expand your career. Throughout today's session, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of our speaker by clicking the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or by emailing alumni@ucop.edu. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the event. I am pleased to be joined by my 5 inspiring UC alumni. Tuning in today from Seattle is Mylene Bariso, a UCLA alumni who serves as the Director of IT Human Resources for the Boeing Company. Siobhan Charles, a graduate of UC Merced, is the Director of Consumer Communications at Visco and joins us today from Southern California. Tuning in from Northern California is Dr. Christina Mangurian, a professor of psychiatry and epidemiology and biostatistics and vice chair for diversity and health equity for the Department of Psychiatry at the UCSF Wiles Institute for Neurosciences. Christina is a proud alumna of UC San Francisco. UC Berkeley alumna Rose Samini serves as North America and Latin American Lean-In Circles and Company Engagement Senior Associate for the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation. Roz is joining us from the Bay Area. Also joining us from the Bay Area is UC Irvine alumna Stina Trainer, who works as the head of policy visits and part of the global policy team at Facebook. Mylene, Siobhan, Christina, Roz, and Stina, thank you so much for being part of today's panel. So without further ado, let's dive into our first question. Mylene, I'm going to start off with you. We'd love to hear about your career journey and the role that women's leadership groups, employee resource groups, or women mentorship have played in your professional development.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be part of this, so welcome to all participants. When I think about my career journey, I'm first generation, immigrated from the Philippines when I was 3 years old, so very fortunate to be part of the UCLA family. Didn't have the background, though, when it comes to building a network and the support components coming up through the ranks. First at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, parent company Enterprise Holdings. So I spent 23 years of my career there, starting on the sales floor, moving up into outside sales, and then moving ultimately into the VP of HR before transitioning to the Boeing Company. Both companies very, very different in the way that they manage and approach components. At Enterprise, it's very entrepreneurial, very grassroots, and there was a lot of very specific support that came from my colleagues and peers. I am always greeted with a little bit of a side eye when I say many of the support components and the mentoring came from white men who saw what I could offer, pushed me into places I was uncomfortable going into, and supported me through that learning curve. Coming to the Boeing Company, however, and being in a very different manufacturing and engineering environment, there are many active business resource groups, employee resource groups that represent an array of all of the diverse represented individuals that make up that web and that cloth that is the Boeing Company. So those components do provide in a global, very diverse set of skills and talents and spaces within the Boeing Company, a chance for folks to exhibit leadership skills, to build mentoring and network beyond perhaps where they are comfortable. So I've been more active in some of the ERGs, as we call them, related to our disability groups, our LGBTQ groups, and also various organizations of color. So those things, having been in a space at Enterprise where a lot of it was much more grassroots, independent, the people that you worked with, to now a more formal environment has really shown me the gamut of where your mentoring can come from, and has encouraged me, as I encourage others, to be open to where that mentoring and support could come your way, because you never know what's going to happen as your career progresses.
Great, thank you. Siobhan, would love to hear from you as well.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. So glad and happy to be here. I think, similar to Mylene's experience, I think you sort of never know where you'll find a mentor. And a lot of my career, I've spent just sort of trying to be that example that I want to see and that I need. I'm also a first person in my family to go to a university and graduate, and kind of, lots of new experiences that I've had to walk alone, with my family not really being able to help me as much as others around me. So a lot of where I have found being most resourceful has been trying to educate myself, being proactive, and not just being a victim of circumstance, and not just being a victim of what I don't know, really being curious and trying to go out of my way to just seek information and sort of figure it out with what tools I've had. But I definitely can say there have been a number of folks in my life, in my professional environment, that have been helpful. And a lot of it has been just as, osmosis of seeing that I wanted to learn and that I was being proactive on my own. And I have a couple of mentors, a couple that come to mind. A good mentor of mine, Scott, he's actually a African man whom I met at Twitter, who just kind of took me under his wing. He's seen I was proactive. I stepped up to sort of help shape our ERG charter there for Blackbirds at Twitter, and a lot of the help that I got came as a result of me being proactive, and people seeing that I was hardworking and not waiting on the answers or waiting for help to fall in my lap.
Thank you. Christina, could you please respond?
Sure. And hi, everybody. I guess I'm going to just tell you where I am now and then kind of the journey getting there. So right now, my passion really is breaking down silos and trying to promote mental health equity. I do that whether it's through my clinical work, my science, or my education activities. And I tried doing this in the community, but also with the workforce. A lot of my more recent work is based on promoting gender equity in academic medicine. So that's where a lot of my time is spent. I run a large lab, I direct a fellowship program, and as you mentioned, Dianna, I'm vice chair for diversity and health equity. But as others have said, the journey here, I couldn't have really predicted that I would get here. And I wouldn't have known that. I always knew that I had a social justice slant. My parents are both very liberal, and always thought it was very important for me to give back to my community. So I knew that's what I always wanted to do, but I didn't know exactly how to. And all that they put in my heart very early on was this important need to get a good, strong education. My mom was a professor of biology. Her father, she actually grew up in Ecuador, and her dad was a doctor, and, was very like, you need to go to school. that was the most important aspect. So then I did some different things. I went to Reed College. Then I came and moved in San Francisco. I ended up deciding to go to medical school. That gave me a lot of different options. I decided to go into psychiatry, went to Columbia, and then came back to San Francisco. And I think the question really about how mentors has helped me is they've helped guide and figure out how to kind of use my skills and use my passions to kind of move forward. And I'll mimic what Mylene said. I had a lot of really great white male mentors, people who took me under their wing and helped me along the way. I'd say as I've grown more senior, what I've noticed is that I have even more senior mentors who are women. And not just mentors, a lot of them are sponsors. I found most of my sponsors are women. And for those of you who don't know what a sponsor is somebody who also talks about you in public settings might give you opportunities that you might not have. And I found that I get a lot of that from a lot of senior, really wonderful women in my life. I also relied heavily throughout the years and learned more and more about really relying on peer mentors. I think we're going to be talking about this a little bit more later, but I've really had groups of women and groups of peers who've helped me along the way navigate this journey.
Thank you. Roz?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Just to kind of echo what others have said, I'll kind of start with where I'm at now and kind of talk a little bit how I ended up here, kind of somehow creates a full circle. So I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2017, and I currently work at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation. You may have heard of Lean In. I support our circles community across North, Central, and South America. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later down the line. But when I entered school, I was super passionate about kind of understanding workplace gender dynamics, understanding why the wage gap exists. And I knew I wanted to study something I was really passionate about. You know, everyone told me go into something that's a bit more kind of going to get you that job, going to get you that security when you leave school. But I knew I wanted to study something I was really passionate about. And so I really leaned on those kind of academic advisors just at the dorms. You know, we had them in our dorms. So freshman year, I walked in there, I said, I don't know what I want to study. Can you help me? And I worked with a couple of different academic advisors, and they really helped me kind of guide me towards what I ended up studying, which I did the ISF department degree, which is, I'm not sure if other UCs have it, but at UC Berkeley, the interdisciplinary studies field department, where you can study essentially something that you're really passionate about and do research on that. And so I did research on the gender wage gap, workplace gender dynamics, unconscious gender bias, and really kind of put my whole entire academic career on that. And I loved it. I really, really found it to be kind of what I was really passionate about and what I loved. And I also leaned on my professors, kind of asking them, you know, what do I do with this degree? Kind of helping me guide me into my career. And I got really, really great advice. So just asking them, you know, how do I do what you do? Or how do I kind of guide myself to do something I'm really passionate about down the line? And they pushed me and really kind of guided me towards, you know, going into consulting, which is what I did right after school, which gave me really good business acumen. I served on their inclusion and diversity committee after that. And after I left, I kind of realized I wanted to do more social impact work, and now working at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation. So, you know, doing the work that I love doing, something that I never expected I would be able to do so early on in my career, but just being able to have those kind of advisors and professors in school, and then obviously family and friends, and then now kind of helping me kind of decide, okay, what's the right career move? What's the right thing to do? Kind of pushing me to leave my last job when I didn't have a job lined up, for example, kind of gave me that support to kind of do something so bold. And now ending up in a place that makes me truly happy and kind of allows me to do something I'm really passionate about. So.
Great. Stina.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for moderating today. I'll start by also thanking the UC Office of the President for convening this. It's so fun to connect with, it looks like, over 350 people from around the country, maybe even some international people too, today. As you see behind me, I'm a graduate of UC Irvine, and I currently work at Facebook, but mostly today I'll be talking about my experience, my decade plus working in the public sector. I greatly benefited from the UC DC program, and I know other panelists as well participated in that. I did UC DC going into my senior year, and it probably is what is most responsible for the career I've had so far. So I attended graduate school in Washington, D.C. I got my master's there and started working in politics. My first job while in school, I worked while going to grad school, was with a nonprofit that promoted youth voter turnout. And this was in the olden days. This is pre-Obama, when the youth vote wasn't a thing yet, back in 2004, 2005. And then after that experience, I moved back to my home state of California and worked on a local race in San Jose for a woman who was running for mayor in San Jose. From there, I got a job with Nancy Pelosi, who had just become Speaker of the House, so was working in her San Francisco office, and then moved to the leadership office in DC after 5 years with her here in San Francisco. From there, I actually relocated to New York, where I ran a congressional office for a member named Hakeem Jeffries. He represents Brooklyn and parts of Queens. I left Congressman Jeffries' office to join the Obama administration, where I served as Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief of Protocol at the U.S. mission to the United Nations for Ambassador Samantha Power, who was a cabinet member in the Obama administration. In the fall of 2016, I left the federal government and joined the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working on global policy and advocacy issues. I then returned to the government for a short stint as Assistant Commissioner for the City of New York in their Department of Finance. And then I said adieu to New York City and moved back home once more to San Francisco, where I join you today, and where I am currently running the Policy Visits program as part of the Global Policy org at Facebook. And as I share all those roles, the reason I share that is to tell you all today that 6 out of 7 of those roles that I mentioned, I got from my network. And in half of those roles, I was not even looking for a job, but someone proactively came to me and I reactively said, well, that job sounds interesting. And that's how I moved forward and have grown in my career. It's really from our network. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about these networks and different people who have opened up doors for us, who have recommended us. Christina mentioned sponsorship, mentorship. So really pleased to be here today to talk a little bit more about the role that networks can play in career growth. And particularly in this time, I'll just commend those who have called in. This is a really hard time in our economy. I know a lot of people are shifting in current roles. They are maybe shifting careers in sectors. And so I'm really looking forward to a great conversation today to talk about how we can use our networks.
Thank you, Stina. You actually teed up perfectly for our next question. Why is finding a support network at work important for career progression and professional success? Siobhan, love to hear you.
Hi, everybody. I feel like it's critical mostly because you can't do everything on your own, and to continue just evolving and challenging yourself, you're going to need help. You're going to need access to more resources, and Christina touched on this as well, but it's so important for you to have visibility sort of outside of your sort of a immediate environment. So as far as allyship and being able to sort of network and just seize opportunity. Some opportunities we might not hear about sort of in our immediate circles or our immediate peer groups. And I think, and just kind of thinking about yourself as a young professional and as someone who's growing and kind of emerging in a certain field, it's so critical to have people you can tap to sort of check in on opportunities, to check in on career moves you could make. I think right now, even in the state of this economy, and even if I think about prior to me graduating from high school and college, even a lot, like the jobs that a lot of us have now, especially in tech, didn't exist back then. And a lot of sort of what you might have imagined to be possible, even sitting where you are now, there might be bigger ideas for you or other ways you can add value to certain businesses. A lot of what I did as well, I'd say within ERG groups, but also just within my work environments, was asking a lot of questions and sitting down just to do informational interviews and being curious and proactive and reaching out to people. And I think also it's establishing allies and mentors and networks that are outside of your job function or your area of expertise. So if I think about me, 2 things I know really well, or 3 things: music, culture, like marketing and comms. And a lot of my curiosity in tech, I've spent mostly trying to talk to people on the inside, people on the technical side, and just establishing access to more senior leaders who aren't necessarily traditionally in my scope. And I think that has enabled me to challenge myself as well and just approach problem solving from a different perspective. And I think you just need to surround yourself with diverse thinkers and diverse leaders. And so you can be a diverse thinker and leader yourself. And I think just in tech, in business period, we've seen the power of a business that has diverse thinkers and diverse people at the table versus businesses who do not. So that's sort of what I would add to that right now.
Thank you. Mylene?
I apologize. I had to get myself off mute. As I was thinking about what Siobhan was sharing, coming from a background of retail, P&L, marketing, customer service, I've always advised folks to think about themselves like a business and build what I would call your own personal board of directors. Having that group that can advocate, that can sponsor, that can hip check you if you're not quite fluent in certain languages of business. That support network, both internal and external, to my experience, whether it was at Enterprise Holdings or at the Boeing Company, has really provided a lot of what Siobhan has said: diversity of thought, diversity of approach. When I was building my career from being a frontline retail person up to more senior levels of management, it became very evident to me that I had to know more than one language of business. I couldn't just do the sales talk. I needed to understand finances. I needed to understand our relationships with our representatives. So in the world of Stina, how do we partner across these types of sectors, segments, so that we can holistically and strategically drive where the business is going and your career? So with kind of a board of directors approach, what do these various voices bring to me, to you, as you grow your career, as we all continue to grow? That's one of the elements that crystallized very early in my career. At the Boeing Company, we are exceedingly complex with the many types of products, the global reach, the complexity in the way that our matrixed organization operates. Again, echoing what you've heard, you're not going to get anything done on your own. It really is about how to utilize and leverage the various aspects of a function, of a business unit, to collaboratively be able to execute. And that's easier said than done when you're dealing with time zones, when you're dealing again with languages, whether it's a language of business or that global component. There are many elements of how do you move forward. And one of the things that I've coached folks around, whether it was in my own small consulting firm, as I've coached different executives and women and people of color through their careers, or in my day job of being an HR professional, I tell folks, you know, when you're thinking about that concept, who do you know? Yes, network is super important. It's great that you know folks, but I would also ask, who knows you? If I were to walk up to an individual, you know, unlike Miss Stina, I could not walk up to President Obama and he would know me. I know who he is, but he does not know me. So how well does your network, our support groups, truly understand the value, the skills, the abilities that you can bring to an organization, to a project, to a concept? It's got to go both ways. Support cannot be a one-way street. It's got to be a give and take, and it's got to be part of the evolution.
Thank you. Christina.
Yeah, no, this is amazing hearing from all of the different speakers. I'll talk about something a little different. And I love, Mylene, the idea of the board of directors, and Siobhan also about kind of going outside your field. I think now what I'm going to talk about is some networks that are kind of within your field. And so in medicine, we talk a lot about pearls of wisdom, right? Where you're getting these different pearls of wisdom. And you can get a lot of pearls from a mentor, right? Or from this board of directors of mentors. But what these networks of peers can do is you get kind of all of the different mentors' pearls kind of brought into one setting at your kind of similar career level. So what I'll talk about, I'll get really specific on this and some examples of them. So when I was an early faculty member, I was sponsored to go to the AAMC Early Career Development for Women. It's that's the Association for American Medical Colleges. I went to Washington, D.C., learned all these tips around leadership, but what we did is we had these small groups of women. And I felt like that small group of women just understood where I was at that time. I was having a baby, I was trying to become a doctor, do all these different things with my career. They understood it. And so when I came back to UCSF, I actually built something like that, built a group of providers at Zuckerberg San Francisco General. That's where I'm based. And so people who are working in a safety net hospital who were like me, you know, early women in their careers and doing their work and trying to build their research program or education. That group has grown and expanded, taken on kind of a life of its own, and was actually able to advocate for things within our organization. Our organization at UCSF is 24,000 employees, right? That's not even counting the students at all. And so us being able to advocate for things like paid family leave was something that we were able to do strongly together. Another peer group that I am part of is Time's Up Healthcare. So I'm a founding member of Time's Up Healthcare. It's under the umbrella of Time's Up, which I imagine most of you know about. This is, it's amazing to be part of this network of very strong leaders trying to make a difference in medicine throughout the country. I also set up a smaller group of people like me who are diversity leaders in psychiatry. And so this again was a group of women across the country. It was all women, predominantly women of color. And it was a way to kind of network and collaborate and again, advocate for things, that there's strengths in your networks of some similar groups. I think this is more of an and. There are a lot of different pearls here that people are bringing up, and it's just figuring out the ones that make the most sense to you.
Thank you. Mylene, can you tell us more about how employee resource groups or leadership groups work at your organization?
Sure. Employee resource groups, business resource groups are aligned to the various cultural and ethnic and just the array of diversity groups that are out there. They are established by the company, so they're given a bit of a budget. They are also very tightly connected with our global equity, diversity, and inclusion group. It's a brand new name, so I had to remember that. And they're tied in various ways as you kind of go through the organizations. They're utilized in a variety of ways. The way they're utilized in the organization I support, which is the IT and data analytics organization, we have a diversity council, and folks on the diversity council are also members of various ERGs or BRGs. They use that network to promote a variety of things, whether it is open opportunities, whether it is volunteer opportunities. Are there guest speakers? Are there is it, Asian American Month or whatever the case might be? Is it Pride Month? And by utilizing those networks throughout, we're able to get the word out for career opportunities, mentoring opportunities, learning opportunities, as well as providing that support group. And I've been encouraging and advocating among my senior leader cohorts, how do we look into these groups to see who is leading in what spaces, and encouraging them perhaps to grow, develop their careers by saying, hey, you've had a leadership role in this space, you've advocated, you've taught others how to lead and grow in this BRG, ERG space. Why don't you consider this opportunity in your professional space? So it's been a real passion of mine to try to bridge that BRG, ERG experience into the career development component and continuing to strengthen the pipeline for cross-functional support and growth all around the Boeing organization. So for many, I think there is a passion that drives them to be engaged with BRGs and ERGs, but I also would like to think, and I'm a big fan of, channeling that passion to personal growth and development, career development as well. I hope that answers the question, so let me know if I should clarify.
Oh, I thought that was great. And when we go for more questions, we can probably delve a little deeper. Roz, can you share more about your organization, how it works with others looking to launch or expand the ERGs or women's leadership groups?
Yeah, definitely. So I work in my role at Lean In. I support companies specifically across North, Central, and South America, but we do support companies globally to launch programs that support women. And so that kind of comes into shape in a couple of different ways. But I work with, diversity inclusion leaders, HR leaders, but also, women working in organizations that run women's ERGs. And so we have 3 key programs. And I think 2 of them would be really helpful for folks today on the call to kind of know about. The first is Lean In Circles. And these are small groups of women that come together to support each other, to learn new skills, and to kind of build that sense of community. So kind of going away from that idea of networking to community, I think is kind of a mind shift that can help folks kind of get more comfortable with meeting folks and kind of building that personal board of directors that Mylene said, and that kind of peer support group that I know Christina was just talking about. So kind of creating that space of safety. In the workplace, you might experience something as a woman or a woman of color and think that it's about you, that you did something wrong, or that it's something that you did. But really, when you come together in those small groups and have really kind of candid conversations, you realize, no, this is a system. This is something that we need to actually come together and change. And something that I always encourage folks in ERGs to do is use data. So use data to kind of support your claims that you want to make. So if you want to push something forward in your organization, use data to kind of track trends, to understand kind of what's going on with the women within your organization, to kind of elevate that up to senior leaders. So the first one is Lean In Circles, as I just mentioned, and anyone can start a circle. You just get a couple of employees together, and then from there, your circle kind of may grow, and you may branch off into multiple circles. And so women's ERGs will oftentimes work with us to kind of launch these circles programs, and this is a free program that anyone can kind of launch. And we also have programming. So if you want to do skill building content, if you want to kind of work together on negotiation, we always say the first time you negotiate for your salary or for a raise or for promotion should not be in front of your boss. It should be with your circle. So with those peers, your personal board of directors that are there to support you. And so we have over 2 years worth of free content that anyone can download from our website if you're interested in kind of building those specific skills on public speaking, leadership, negotiation, work-life balance, anything that you want. And we're also kind of launching resources specifically to kind of what's going on now with COVID-19. And then the second program that I work with companies on is called 50 Ways to Fight Bias. And so a lot of the systemic issues that we see in organizations have to do with unconscious bias. And these aren't biases that men hold necessarily. These are biases that we all hold. And it's important to understand kind of the intersectionality around these biases. So, I as a woman of color carry different biases, or people have different biases towards me versus a white woman. And so understanding those differences and making sure that we are all super equipped to, 1, identify bias in the workplace, and 2, what do we actually do in that moment when we see that, oh, another time, my female colleague is being spoken over. What do I do in that moment to not cause a whole scene, but to actually drive change? And to elevate those voices as well. And so this is a program, again, free, that anyone can kind of use. And we really encourage these women ERGs to kind of host sessions on kind of dismantling bias within their workplaces. And so I work with organizations to run these programs. I work with women leader ERGs to kind of implement these programs within their workplace. And so the organizations that I work with, all their ERGs look a little bit different. And I think that gives you, in the audience, if you're thinking, oh, how do I get involved with my ERG? You can add so much value, because this is essentially in a way a volunteer organization within your company. And you're adding so much value by kind of putting your voice to the table and kind of adding your perspective and saying, hey, we should do bias training, or hey, I want to start a Lean In Circle, or hey, I want to start kind of a speaker series, for example. And so those are some of the ways that I work with organizations, and I've seen so much diversity in women's ERGs and how they run and how they function. And oftentimes, they do have a budget, which is great, but if you don't have a budget, just know that you have so many resources to kind of utilize to make the programming super, super strong. And it's all about kind of, sticking your hand up and saying, I want to do this. I want to start this initiative. And like Mylene said, this gives you a lot of credibility and leadership opportunities, and kind of saying, hey, I've done this great leadership, role. I'm ready for the next role in my career.
Great, thank you. I want to pause here for just a quick second and remind the group, in a few minutes, we'll begin addressing questions from today's audience. Please remember to submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or by emailing alumni@ucop.edu. And also, I'd like to just add something on a personal level. This discussion is really amazing. and just stress the value again of the support network, the mentors, your peer groups, etc. As someone who's benefited from that, it helped me tremendously to develop the strategies for my own career growth, particularly the discussions about the diverse thinking and forcing us sort of out of our comfort zone, which is all things that we, myself have experienced or were difficult for me to do. But it's through that network and support, I was able to actually overcome some of those fears, challenges, et cetera, and do things like present to senior leadership, do public speaking at regents meetings, et cetera, and things like moderate a large panel for a large group of people. So it definitely has some value. So with that being said, I'd like to go to a question for Stina. How do you create or foster a support network when a formal system may not exist?
Sure. Thanks, Diana. I have kind of two approaches to this, and I know that we have a lot of mid-career people on the line listening as well. So I kind of see two different ways to approach building a support network. The first is inspired by a great quote by Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who said, if there's no seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. So the first is, if you see people gathering, if you see meetings taking place at work, to push yourself forward. And that can be really, really hard to do and uncomfortable for a lot of people to be a self-advocate, but ask. Those who don't ask don't get. And that goes for negotiations, that goes for promotions, that goes for even, hey, there's this VP in the room and I think she's really inspiring. I just want to ask her to get a cup of coffee with me. You will always be surprised how eager people are to help. So bring that chair, bring that chair. And on the other side of that, another metaphor is hold that door open. So you might have walked through a door in your career. You are now in leadership. You are at the top of your game, but not so long ago you weren't. So turn back around and hold that door open and ask yourself who you're going to bring in. So with both of those things. So if you're just starting, if you're a veteran in your industry, looking around and saying, maybe there's not a speaker series. Maybe you haven't called Roz yet. Roz, I can't wait to tap into those resources. Thank you for sharing those. We are always sharpening our knives as we work, right? That we are never checking a box in our career growth. We always have to remind ourselves of the skills that we need to bring to the table, the negotiation tactics, the relationships. But that's really what I see about building a network. And I think we're going to get to this later in the conversation as well. And Christina mentioned this, but peer mentorship to me has been huge. The women that I have met over the last 15 years who have now grown with me in our careers, we have in turn hired each other. We have in turn recommended each other and linked each other up because we were in those same moments. First we were recent college grads and then we were mid-level, or now we want to be a manager. Having that emotional support is also critical. It's not just about seeing someone who's so far ahead of you and saying, I want to get there and I don't know how, but looking side by side and recognizing the qualities that our colleagues have and leaning on them to help give us the confidence that we are able to push forward in our careers. And one thing, Diana, that you said, and we've touched on this a little bit, I think a lot about affinity bias. And affinity bias is that comfortable way of saying, I'm just going to turn and help the person who looks just like me, or who reminds me of a younger version of me. And really crossing that out and saying, in Mylene, you mentioned this, you were mentored by white men, to say who out there in this company or in this work environment might need that little extra nudge to say, you know who you should connect with is so-and-so in this other department. Or I'd like to bring you to lunch with some of my colleagues, introducing someone to new people who might feel like an outsider. And I know women too, yes, women too, we have so much of an inferiority complex sometimes, or an imposter syndrome of, well, I've been invited to the table, I'm scared to open my mouth because they're going to figure out I should be actually sitting on the sidelines. So I'll wrap up and say, for those of us who are at the table, look back behind you. Is there a young woman who's a note taker who might actually have something to add to the conversation? Siobhan said this, the most successful companies are the most diverse companies. So let's bring those voices to the table. And that's something that we can all do no matter what our level is.
Thank you. Siobhan,
All right, unmuted. I think I always, my approach has definitely always been to echo Stina. My approach has definitely always been where I see a gap, fill it. Where I see opportunity for something, like take up space, and whatever support you think you need, like create it, find it, and make it. I think I've been in at places where most of I'd say that the start of my tech experience formally outside of college was at Twitter. I went to Twitter when it was just a startup before they IPO'd. My team was like a team of 3 or 4. The company was super small, and like ERGs didn't even exist yet. And a lot of the work that I had to do was definitely building alongside other people who were like-minded and sort of shared that same I would say just like mission of inclusion and building support systems. And I think sometimes we see thought leadership as something that needs to be super visible or sort of with all this cloud attached versus just aligning with people who share your same mission. And a lot of where I seen gaps at Twitter, I sort of just spoke to people, talked to people, and immediately just sought out people who are aligned with the mission and wanted to do the work and wanted to create more inclusive environments that fostered what we needed. Our focus was trying to create an environment that served our needs, but would also serve the needs of other people, once we no longer occupied the space. So I say, if there are opportunities for you to sort of create something, don't be afraid to create something. Don't be afraid to do it your way. That might be just what that organization needs. Sometimes that doesn't feel good when you're going against the grain or sort of challenging structure. I love doing that now versus before, earlier in my career. I didn't enjoy that painful process as much. It can feel defeating. It can feel discouraging, especially when you're like the only person of color or that only Black voice like yelling really loud. But trust me, it's exactly what these organizations need, and it's exactly what is going to create a better tomorrow for other people who come after you. Like sometimes you have to break down the door and like be the change that you're trying to see and be the change that you need.
Thank you. Roz, would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to really echo what Siobhan said. I think that's absolutely right. And, a way to do that is to literally start a circle. If you do not have a formal system within your organization, a formal program, you can just start small. You start a circle, call on a couple colleagues. I guarantee you other women in the organization are looking for this resource as well. Start small, don't be shy. Don't be scared that's starting out small. You will grow. Once people kind of find out about it and learn about this great resource, more of them will come, and there's power in numbers. Once there are 50 plus people in your circle, that's a women's ERG right there. And you can go to your senior leaders and say, hey, we want a budget. We're doing great things. We're really supporting women in this organization. We're providing resources for them. We're providing skill building resources. Can we have a budget? Can we formalize this group? Circles are meant to be small. They're meant to be that peer-to-peer support. It's a way to kind of provide mentorship at scale as well. So the skills and kind of experiences that you have might be useful to another individual within your organization. And that's kind of how you do knowledge sharing. You can start by registering your circle on leanin.org or just starting it and kind of emailing some colleagues and saying, hey, I'm starting this meeting. We're going to be meeting on a monthly basis. We're going to be talking about some of the experiences that we have as women in this organization, and we're going to see what happens. You can start from there. I know a lot of folks that have started in that way and kind of grew into something big. And once you kind of have those powers and numbers, you can really go to senior leaders and say, hey, we have something really great going on, and we would like a budget. We want some more airtime here. So yeah, exactly as Siobhan said, if something doesn't already exist, you can go ahead and start it out and start small, and eventually it will get bigger.
Great. I'm going to ask for we have a lot of audience questions coming in, but I want to ask some quick thoughts from Christina. A number of our audience members have expressed interest in mentoring others, but are not sure they're ready. How do you know you were ready, and what advice do you have for others?
It's so funny that you say that, because I think a quality that I share with a lot of the other women on here is kind of jumping in and doing things when it seems like there's an opportunity. So I think that's a style style and characteristic that I have. I think that I had known early on that mentors came in various sizes and shapes. I had mentors since I was in high school, I guess, because I was doing some science at that point in time. And the first time that I actually was a mentor, I was in, I guess, my residency, and I was trying to do a project study and found a medical student, and this is a student that ended up working with me. I think the roles of the mentors seem to be kind of fall into three buckets. I think one is being a good role model. The other is a really good listener and reflecting back. I think being that sounding board to hear what the mentee is saying and hearing what's in their heart, what's really driving them, and then promoting them. I liked what Stina was saying, bringing them through the door. So I think some of the things that I do to accomplish these things, you know, I've always been a good listener. I listen, but I really try to figure out what are my mentees' goals. You know, I try to make a plan for them achieving the goals and try to have plans that have products. It's not just a time for us to sit and, I mean, it is, some of it is a time to listen and talk and work through kind of hard things, but also focus on what can they walk away with after they're with me for however long. What can they have that will help them? I think setting up structure is also important. And then being a good role model, like showing them that things are not always easy, you know, and that hiccups come along the way, exposing that sometimes if you feel comfortable, modeling how to overcome these challenges and making sure people know, you know, you're looking, all the viewers here are looking at several really ambitious, strong women who I also believe have loved ones and families who come first, you know. That those things are important, you know. And so you know, making sure that you know, it's really hard to be successful when a lot of, you know, when people don't always look like you know, that can be a challenge, especially as you kind of move up the pattern. But showing them that, you know, that you're a complete person, I think is also really important.
Stina, would love to hear your quick thoughts.
Sure. Let me build off of what Christina just said. Sometimes you'll see someone and say, how could I possibly get to where she is? And I think one thing that's really important to call out is that I don't think there's such thing as a career ladder. I think there's a career lattice. And you might climb up, you might climb down, you might be a manager and then go back to being an individual contributor. You might be at the top of your game in one industry, you're going to do a career switch, you feel like you're at the bottom starting all over again. And all of that is okay. And not every job you have is going to be incredible. And you're going to learn something from those jobs that aren't, and you're going to take that to the next job. And so I really want to kind of just clear the smoke. There's no secret sauce. Like you, particularly to the young people on the call, everyone who you're listening to today probably just worked really, really hard. A lot of places are a meritocracy. That doesn't mean that there aren't biases in the workplace, and that's what we're here to talk about and how to combat those. But at the core is working hard. So to go to your question, Diana, about mentorship, though, I am someone who I'm a former manager, and she still mentors me today. And then the women that I mentor, I also used to manage. So I did not come to this through an ERG or kind of being set up. I don't know if there's an app where you can swipe for mentors. Maybe that's a great idea. Some entrepreneur can come up with that. And it can be very awkward. It's like asking someone out on a date. Am I supposed to walk up to a woman and say, you know, do you like me? Will you be my mentor? That sounds uncomfortable to me. I'm sure there are others that are better at that. So I just greatly benefited from having a manager who, even after I left that role, continued to help me grow and support me. And that is something in turn I do for women who used to work for me, because out of all the people, I can probably speak to their work ethic or product the best because I saw them in a particular role. So I would say there's no, Christine talked about formal mentorship, and I think some fields have that and others may not. But it's okay to seek that guidance from someone who might not be typical either. And again, going back to peer mentorship, I think is a really valuable resource. And there's also, for those who might want to be a mentor, there's no prerequisite. everyone, I don't care who you are, I know it without knowing you, you have something to offer someone else from your career journey. In this panel, we have ranged from recent college graduates to not recent college graduates. And we all have a story to share about how we got to where we are today. And I think that's a big part of networking. I see a lot of questions from the audience about networking. You have something to learn from everyone. So Christina mentioned how mentors need to be good listeners, but when you're networking, you need to be a good listener. And that might feel strange because you might think you're in this seat of saying, I need to, showcase my skills and tell them all about me, but you're going to learn a lot more by hearing how that person got to where they are. And then just a final actionable tip. I like that, Christina, too. You said, let's have some tangibles here. Whenever I meet someone, when I do networking, and I would say when I was looking for a job it was about 2.5 years ago, I met with over 60 people. At the end of each coffee, salad, call, whatever it was, I said, are there 2 people you recommend I connect with? And it's as simple as that. And some people go, oh yeah, my friend so-and-so used to work in such and such. Let me link you guys up. 2 people. For each person you meet with, ask for 2 more. Your calendar will be full because not everyone is going to say yes either, but you have 2 more people to grow from, to learn from. And I think that's just a nice thing to do when you're looking for a new job.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the audience. Our first question comes from Brandy, and this is for all our panelists. Did anyone obtain mentors/sponsors through a formal program, through networking groups, or at their companies?
No formal program here, Mylene speaking. It was really just about, I think you've heard it from a lot of my colleagues here on the panel, being your authentic self. I heard a lot of authenticity. So be your authentic self, putting in the work, as Siobhan said, being results oriented. I believe those are the components that drew the mentors to me. I did see some chatter about, did my male mentors seek me out or did I seek them out? They sought me out. So from that standpoint, I had it easy as an early college grad and brand new in the workforce. They were the ones that came to me and said, I see your work, I see your competitiveness, I see your desire to grow and your willingness to learn. And they were the ones who then pushed from there. But nothing formal was ever put in front of me.
But that said, I'll just jump in. I do think organizations are starting to think more explicitly about operationalizing some sponsorship. And it's tricky because you want to make the match right. But how it's worked traditionally is, right, the old boys club, and then you kind of promote those and sponsor those that you know or might look like you, right? And so I know I've been thinking a lot about how to do that, within academic medicine, as in with I'm positive in all the careers that these amazing women have, the number of women and number of people of color as you go up reduces, right, dramatically. And so trying to figure out how to operationalize it. So I think it's a very good question. And there are some mentorship programs. I did not take advantage of it, but I'm thinking a lot about operationalizing sponsorship.
Yeah, and to jump in here. Oh, go ahead, Siobhan.
Sorry, Roz. I was just gonna say to echo Christina also through Magic Intermelanin, my creative collective. I'm on basically like my second round of doing a fellowship program that kind of does this, because something that I've seen also is you may need mentorship that's very specific to the chapter that you're in the circumstance that you're in. Like, for instance, if I think about my mentorship for me and sort of how I've approached it with others and how I've seen it really work well for me is it's less of sort of this full-time job or role people are standing in. It's more sort of in flux to what my needs are and what my journey is, depending on what phase I'm in my career. And because of that, I see mentorship as long-term, but also in the immediate term, a bit of a revolving door as you meet new people and you're sort of on this journey, right? In your career, you're going to different companies. You may meet a professor you may stay in touch with that professor. You might not. You might meet a new professional as a part of an internship or a job. So I sort of see it as something that comes in ebbs and flows, but I also realize, just like if you're a person and you need mental health resources and you want to find, like, there's a therapy for Black girls group, I think there is a lot of benefit in, you know, working with mentors who actually understand the struggles you're going through and the nuance around your experiences. Because while, you know, we might, while I love a good ally and a powerful white male helping me out, there are just some things that he or she will never understand about what I'm going through. And I think we do need more resources that are a bit nuanced for us to sort of, like, you know, find folks, you know, like myself, or someone who's even in C-suite, who's a Black woman who wants to mentor and has the capacity to mentor. I think that's the other thing, is a lot of people of color and Black leaders, we're so overwhelmed with being just that we don't get a chance to have the bandwidth to mentor or think about these things, because we're so under stress and duress and working in these environments. So just some nuances I want to point out. And I think there's definitely a gap, and we have to work on filling that gap, which is why I'm trying to do the work myself, because it gets tough sometimes. You can't talk to, you know, they could be a great person, but you can't tell them all about your issues. That they might not be able to truly see it through your perspective.
Yeah, and just to echo what Siobhan said, you may not have one mentor for your entire career. I highly doubt that would happen. I've actually never had one mentor myself, but coming to a specific individual and asking very specific questions. They are very busy people saying, I want to know how you did this, or I'm, you know, struggling between this and this. Can you help me with this specific thing? You know, putting time on their calendar, 30 minutes, asking them those questions, 15 minutes, for example, but coming to them with very specific questions and always thanking them for their time is really important. In terms of kind of structured, formalized, mentorship, a lot of organizations are starting to do that, but some of them, you know, many don't. A couple of the organizations I work with for Lean In Circles, they run circles as a way to provide mentorship at scale. So every circle is run by one moderator who's maybe a more junior level and one senior leader woman. That way she can provide mentorship to 10 to 12 individuals at once. And this is something that you can implement yourself. You can say, hey, we want to, you know, formalize this process, because many women, specifically women of color and specifically Black women, don't have the same opportunity to senior leaders. And it's very important to formalize this process, because women aren't having that same opportunity the way men are, you know, on the golf course or at the bar and things like that. So kind of creating an environment where it's, you know, equal access to mentorship is so incredibly important.
Great. Our next question is for Mylene and Christina, and it comes from David. What is your advice for senior/late career white males like me to recognize, support, and promote the career of female colleagues in the most helpful way? Mylene, Christina?
Christina, you start.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think just you asking that question is huge. So thank you for asking that question. And then I think really, again, I'm not sure what your role is, David, where you are, but I would think about ways that you may have been helped as you were kind of moving up, and try to think about mentioning different star women who work for you in your organization, mentioning them in different meetings, whether you can try to promote them for certain leadership opportunities. Something that you may not know is that actually the studies show that women tend to not apply for kind of some senior level positions as much unless they're specifically asked. So women rank kind of, they'll believe that they need 80% of the job skills, and men will view it as more like, well, if I have 40%, that's good enough. You know, they look at it different. And so you actually have to go and try to target those specific women and ask them to apply. So I've done that quite a bit at in my department for our kind of senior leadership positions, where I've gone out and specifically asked women to apply for positions. So that's a suggestion that you could do that could operationalize, as well as suggest them for different kind of meetings, different networking opportunities with donors. That's something that doesn't happen enough for women. They don't get to go to those different meetings. So if there are those opportunities, I would try to include the women that you feel like deserve it.
I love that. And what I would add from the macro that Christina shared is maybe a little bit of micro. And we've talked about this relative to perhaps the imposter syndrome or the lack of confidence maybe that we women of color may have been socialized under. I'll tell you, I wasn't ever worried about that myself. I come from tiger parents who always pushed me in front of a crowd. So there wasn't a lot of fear in me. But the question, David, that I think is important is, yes, I agree. The fact that you're even aware and sensitive to that is a huge step. The next component I would offer is what we've talked about. Listen. As you listen to the women that are around you and the things that they share, I'm going to now piggyback on Christina's thought, move to action. Take that idea that they shared with you, that's a great one, and encourage them to share it formally in whatever space they're a part of. They may not be ready to do it immediately. And that's where my sales background, I would role play with my team constantly. Say it out loud, practice it, so you don't stumble, so you feel confident in the words, but just having you encourage that component of, I'm seeking you out, I hear you, I see value in what you're saying. Who can we bring that component to, and how can I prepare you to present it in the most effective way possible so that it comes across as polished, prepared, and you are confident in your idea? Those are 3 simple steps that I think if we could normalize and utilize that on a consistent basis, will build that level of advocacy, sponsorship, and will in turn allow women to build the confidence perhaps that they don't already have because they've now practiced and are ready to approach senior leaders, donors, colleagues, peers, etc. Because it is, as someone said earlier, maybe Stina, it does feel a little bit like a first date. Anytime you have to get up in front of someone for the first time or ask for mentorship or whatever, and getting over that awkwardness really just comes from exercising a muscle. So once you build that muscle, it's always going to be there for you.
I just want to add one quick thing to that. Piggybacking off of Mylene, I think the biggest sort of kind of getting over the hill moment, even on my end, if I think about kind of making that jump from entry level to more senior, is definitely knowing how to package and communicate information in a way where it's going to be received and like successfully executed. So I definitely think from a resource perspective, just like coaching is great, preparation is great, and definitely coaching that confidence that we do see a lot of men sort of move with and operate with, and coaching on how to take up space. And I would also say just resources, funding. When you look at venture capital, when you look at your access to rooms that a person like me would never be able to sit in per se, a person who looks like me may never gain entry to some of the rooms that you can occupy and be in. And just the candid conversations you're able to have with getting to the point of needing resources and funding. As my millennial friends on Twitter would also say, open your purse. Like, how can you help fund and back ideas? Because the biggest thing like young Black people need and Black employees need are resources. We don't have resources. That is what we need. We need access and we need resources. The rest of the way, we could probably figure it out, but we really need access and resources.
Okay, I'm going to ask the last question, and it's for Roz, and it comes from Mauro. Is there a way to benefit from lean-in circles outside of formal company organizing? As a group of UC Women of Color alums working in different sectors, we're interested in launching our own lean-in circle.
Yeah, that's a great question, and really happy to speak to that. So circles run in companies, and they also run globally in communities. So you can definitely start a lean-in circle within your community with women that you know or women that you want to get to know. So really encourage you to start a circle with anyone that you know. You can register your circle on leanin.org if you want to get people involved that you may have never met before. And this is also a great way if your organization doesn't have a support system or a network, or maybe it's a smaller organization, getting that support, getting that guidance outside of your organization is also super important. So this is a great way to do that, and anyone can do that for sure.
Okay, on behalf of the University of California, thank you for joining us today for our UC Alumni Career Network webinar. It was a pleasure to connect virtually with each of you today. We appreciate you making time to be part of today's event and hope you've gained valuable advice to help advance your career. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for their time, generosity, and commitment to the University of California. The insights and advice you shared today make me especially proud to be part of the UC community. I hope you will take a few minutes to provide feedback on today's event by following the Survey Gizmo link that appeared on your screen when you launched today's webinar. Your feedback will be used to help determine topics for future sessions. We hope to see you again in August for our next UC Alumni Career Network webinar focused on interview strategies. Please visit ucal.us/ACN for further details on upcoming episodes. Thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.